Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome today to the BPCA webinar. I trust you are all well. We've got some chat going on in the chat section, so that's great. Great to see there's lots of you from all over the UK and a few over in nicer climate areas, Cyprus and things like that. It'd be lovely to be there now, wouldn't it? Great, good to see you all. So today we're going to be talking about trending analysis for EFK capture. I was considering whether to do trending analysis for sort of rodent control as well, because that's been a big thing that's coming up at the moment. But we've only got an hour today, so thought I'd keep it to EFK capture. But to be honest with you, a lot of the principles can be applied across the board with regards to trend analysis. So yeah, again, good to see you all here. We've got 205 of you already. That number will keep ticking up as I'm doing my introductions. Just a quick one, Pest. I mean, blimey, that feels like that was months and months ago, but it's only a couple of weeks. Some of you maybe were there, maybe chatted to some of you as well. Come to some of the presentations. It was like, yeah, I had a whale of a time. We all enjoyed it thoroughly at BPCA. It was great to see a lot of you. Any of you that didn't manage to make it, well, I've got your number and I'll be asking you why. So, and a reminder as well, we've got PPC Live coming up in Harrogate next year. So that's our slightly smaller event that we tend to aim more at the real technical aspects. So lots of great presentations to come up there. Again, Harrogate next year. Around March. So yeah, have a look at that and look out for the promotions coming out. Good to see you. We just as a quick one, so this webinar, as always, we've got one CPD point for the hour that we've got. As we know, it's one CPD point for each hour. So if you've got your BPCA registered, you've pre-registered, it'll all be automatically uploaded for you. If you are watching this afterwards, because we're recording today, it'll be available on the BPCA website and YouTube. If you wanted to share with any colleagues or even watch it again because I'm that interesting, then you can just go onto your relevant CPD scheme and make sure you upload that 1 point, okay? Because of course it won't do it automatically. We've got chat section, so a lot of you are using that already. A lot of you are familiar with it anyway, but if you've got any technical issues or if there's any issues on my side, you can't hear me or see me, then pop it in that chat section. My colleague Sarah's keeping an eye on it, so if say I was to disappear all of a sudden, she'll pop on and keep you updated with regards to how long it's going to take me to get back. But stick with us, I promise. But hopefully I've got everything set up now that I'm not going to get too many technical issues. In the early days it was worrying, but these days I think we're quite confident with it. So yeah, chat section. If you've got a question for me, we've got the Q&A area. So really important because that's the bit I'm going to be looking at mostly. If you put any questions in the chat section, I am not going to see it. So Q&A, put it in there. I'll try and answer all your questions as usual. Do my best with those. Anything we don't get to, if say we run over a little bit and we run out of time, then I'll certainly get those questions answered in an email as a follow-up to the webinar. Okay. And also we'll have a feedback form. So really great. Usually we get, a good percentage of delegates feeding back to us about webinars that, obviously, how I'm doing, but more importantly, the subjects and the level of detail we're covering, and just let us know whether or not we're getting it right. Because, you're the ones that's important to, be able to give you what you need. Okay. Good. I think that's most of the information. As I said, I've had no one tell me or anyone pop up saying that there's any issues with sound or video. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here. And as I said, we're talking about trending analysis for EFK capture. Now, I always like to manage your expectations in terms of who this webinar is for. It's maybe not for somebody who's really experienced and well-versed in how to do EFK trend analysis. Maybe you're a field biologist and you do a lot of it for high profile sites. Of course, still stay with me because it might just be a refresher for you. There might be a few things I mentioned that might give you some ideas. That's great. But really it's aimed at those that maybe haven't done trend analysis before, or you're doing a little bit and you just want to make sure that you're, got all your ducks in a row and crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's. So that's kind of who it's for, kind of that beginner intermediate level. You might have seen at the beginning there, just before we started, BPCA have just managed to get accreditation from the CPD Certified Quality Assurance Scheme. So all of our training, all of our webinars go through a certification process with this accreditation, and of course that allows you to be confident that what we're delivering is of good quality. So yeah, really exciting news that we had and not too long ago. It's the first webinar I've done having that certification. So we're really pleased with that, really pleased. So the agenda, yeah, as always, we're kind of going to do the what, why, when, and how. What is trend analysis? Why do we need to do it? When should we do it? And how should we do it? Because, really, that's the key to life, isn't it? Knowing what, why, when, and how. So hopefully we'll be able to cover everything that you're expecting. And like I said, if there are any questions you've got or any areas that I haven't covered and you think, I thought Natalie would actually cover that bit, then again, stick it in the Q&A section and we can have a chat about it. Or give me a call afterwards. We've got a little quiz as well at the end, just for a little bit of difference, spice it up a little bit, get you all interacting with your keyboards, just a little quiz just to see, make sure you've listened to the things that I've said, and if you all get things wrong, then maybe I've not approached it the right way, but just a bit of fun at the end. Okay, quiz and questions. So again, without further ado, I will continue. I assume everything is good. So trend analysis, in pest management, we always consider a site's history of pest activity. It's always something that we do, isn't it? Whether it's rodents or whether it's flies or crawling insects, it's always something we do. We always consider, right, what's the history of this site? I've got this pest problem that's popped up. Is there anything that's happened in the past that maybe will give me some, really good information to help me go forward and deal with the current problem? And it's usually the first question we ask the customer, have you had this problem before? And if yes, how often and where? Because all these things build a picture, and these standard questions help us formulate a visual for why that pest may be there and where it may be coming from. Because again, that's all that matters, doesn't it? Being able to go, this pest is here because of that thing over there. So I'm going to get rid of that thing. And that probably helped me sort out the larger proportion of this issue that really, really can be as basic as that. And really all of this is trend analysis. We formulate that visual for why the pest may be there, and it's all trend analysis, root cause as well. And really, it's a basic format. And yes, nonetheless, it is trend analysis. Spotting patterns is how we focus in on the cause and then address that cause. Again, if we can find that magic, that magic reason of why that pest is there, it can really help us out. And also trend analysis, it's a science-based solution to identifying and addressing pest issues. Certainly these things are really valuable in terms of the visual aspect, but also, it is science-based. It's based on numbers and data that we collect, and we count things and we put it on a graph and we can see, actually, yeah, look at that. That's changed. I can see it visually. I can stand back and see what's changed over, the course of whether it be, weeks, months, or years, possibly. We'll go into that a bit more in a moment. But these data-led solutions and decisions that you make are really valuable. Building confidence in your customer and seeing that we're not just dealing with the pests and getting rid of the pest problem, but we're putting this data together and actually showing evidence of the things that we're doing and that they're actually working. And for trend analysis for EFK captures, really important, because some of these areas that we may be doing it in are really, really high risk. Okay, so spotting a pattern. It's data-led and a very science-based solution. But the important thing, you can spot patterns, okay, and then address those patterns. In terms of why we, carrying on with why we do it, trending can help with many things. So audits and contract specifications, external auditors such as, BRC, large supermarkets, they may request a current trend analysis on fly machines or even rodent activity. I'm pretty sure, of the 253 of you that are here today, there's a lot of you that are experienced with whether it be, BRC or a large supermarket specification that you get asked for trend analysis. So it's really important that we can provide that. Sometimes this may even be requested where, the pest controller feels it, may feel it's unnecessary. It may not say you need a trend analysis in that standard, but why not do it anyway? I think pretty much most of the standards do say that they want some form of trend analysis, but even if they don't, isn't it just a really good thing to do anyway, especially if you kind of think, well, actually this site is quite high profile and, got real, potential for high risk, then why not do it anyway? But those auditors, the statement there you can see on the slide is actually taken from a standard. I won't say which one, doesn't matter. But it says, insects in EFK catch trays or on sticky film should be removed, counted by insect type, recorded and analysed regularly to monitor these trends. Now, again, each specification might want a little bit more. And as you can see with this one, it says by insect type. We'll come on to a bit of this a bit later on. But, some of the detail could vary. You've got some real, basic forms of trend analysis all the way through to really heavily data-led with, many, many machines, many graphs and many spreadsheets with a lot of confusing numbers on them that can build a really good picture over a course of years, so it's from one extreme to another. There really is, and everything in between, of course. So depending on your site, depending on maybe your auditors or your customers or what you think is needed, will depend on maybe where you sit in that scheme of things, whether you kind of have the more basic side of things or get a bit more complicated. And again, it might not, you may not be working on a site that has a accreditation associated with it. It might just be in a contract specification that you have between you and your customer. They may have experienced trend analysis before and thought, actually, do you know what? I love trend analysis. I'm going to make my current, pest controller do that for me. So they may want you to. So yeah, and it's good. It sets you apart, really, doesn't it? It sets you apart. Going on to another reason why we do it, it helps us figure out what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, and any changes we may need. A bit later on, I'm going to show you some examples of graphs, but you can use that data to look at, right, okay, I feel like I'm doing a good job, but you know what, there's just this certain area, with flies accumulating, or keep getting reports, but I just can't quite hone in on where that issue is. I can't quite figure out why that particular area is getting an issue. And again, looking at these decisions, if you've got a huge increase in queen wasps in March coming out and possibly causing some concern about contamination, then again, looking at that data, you can see that happening, those spikes happening regularly each year, and that's something you can talk to your customer about and explain the reasons why that's happening. And of course, as we know, things like that, it's hard to get those overwintering queens and prevent them from coming out, but at least we can put things in place to mitigate those risks and contamination. And again, I'm going to talk about this a bit more later on, but yeah, it helps us figure out what we're doing right and wrong, and then any changes we need to make. And I mentioned before, it's a real passionate thing. You'll probably know anyway. I want this industry to really, really hold on to and grasp professionalism and be proud of what you do. So, how better to do that other than, providing these data-led solutions and science-based facts, and like these are numbers, these are stats that you can see. Customers really like that, and it really does set you apart from others that maybe don't do these things. And again, it's really something I'm quite passionate about, professionalism. So yeah, why we do it, still carrying on, when we see these visual peaks and troughs, we start to understand problem areas. I mean, again, this is just an example here. You can see, I just mentioned a moment ago, there's, I don't know if you can see my arrow here, but we've got an increase in bees and wasps here. Just a moment ago, I put that statement on, didn't I, with saying in that specification that said by insect type, that specification wanted you to break down that insect type. In this one, I haven't. And this is an example of how, you can be at the more basic end of things. You can just have groupings of insects that are, small flies, large flies, nocturnal flies, because that might be enough for the site that you work on. It might be enough, but others may break it down a bit more. And I think I do give some examples of that a bit later on. But just, going back to this, you can see that in, February and March, there's been an increase in bees and wasps. As we know, February and March in this country, one minute it's 18, 19 degrees, and then the next minute, it's -2 or something. So, these fluctuations in temperatures, certainly when it increases in the heat, we can have an increase in insect activity. And we can see that here. We can stand back and, say to your customers, look at it with your customers, sit with them and say, look, okay, you can see there's a spike here, that's fine, but these are the reasons why, possibly overwintering queens coming out, possibly, bees becoming more active. I think this is all made up data, by the way. These aren't actually sites. These are just examples. But when we have these visual graphs such as this one, we can stand back, see a clear solution to problems. And even though with obviously overwintering queens coming out, it's more of a discussion, accepting that that's something that is going to happen, but how can we make sure that that contamination doesn't get into the product? So, things like maybe extra electrical fly killers, or might want some screens on certain areas, and things like that, and some more clearing up. So you can talk to your customer about it, but it just gives you a good visual. And this is based over a whole year, as you can see. And of course, right, in terms of using data to solve solutions that are happening right there and then, yeah, it might not get you in, because you need a period of time, don't you, to build up data. But the really good thing that it does is it gives you that ability to be able to look back on what's happened and then maybe even prepare for the following years as well. So it's good. You can also see in June here, there's an increase in nocturnal flies. So maybe there's a door that's being left open in the reception area, for example, that needs to be closed. So, you can look back and see how these things affect. I'm just going to have a drink of water. My voice is going. Just I've been talking so much this week, see. Apologies if I do have a little bit of coughing. So yeah, it's really important that we consider these things. Oh, blimey! Excuse me, everybody. So when we're moving on to when should we do trend analysis? Of course, when you're asked. That's the main thing, like we've said, with auditors and your customers. Maybe even your employer has asked you to do a bit more of it. Of course, when it's required in a contract or specification, but also, when it benefits the site, you can make that decision on your own and think, well, okay, it's a small restaurant or takeaway, and maybe there's no standards or contract specifications that says you need to do it, but maybe you get a lot of fluctuations here and there, and you think, having some trend analysis on those 5 machines that you've got can still add some value and really set you apart. So it's important we do those things. And of course, when you're struggling a bit, a trend analysis isn't an instant solution. It doesn't give you instant kind of visual data, because you need to build it up over maybe a few weeks or months. But it can certainly, if you're got an extended period of time with problems, be it rodents or flies, it can be something that you can get some data on, look back on it and go, right, okay, we've had a few months of issues here, let's have a look at some data and see how that can help us. Okay. There we go. So how do we do trend analysis then? So the usual trend analysis that is carried out in pest management is flying insect numbers. I mentioned at the beginning, we are also seeing a lot more requests for trending rodent activities. So maybe you want to do both, but usually it will be the fly counting that is first to be asked for. For flies, you will need to group them in species. Like I said before, you can delve into as much specifics as you want. It might just be large flies, or you might delve into a bit more and say, blow flies, house flies, cluster flies. You can be more specific, and it's up to you to judge that. I'm not here to. It depends on your site. It depends on the the location. If you've got somewhere that's located around a lot of farming areas, or maybe it's city centre and there's some recycling plants around, or household waste sites. Again, all these things will determine how in depth that you go, or what species detail you need to go into. You may just cachet these into one category. Like I said, large flies, small flies. It really does depend on the site that you're monitoring. Make sure you have the right tools so that you can, do the trend analysis. So, you've maybe decided, yeah, this is how I need to make my data work. I need to consider these insects in these categories in this detail. And again, just very brief, large flies, small flies, all the way to, listing, 30 different species. It really is up to you to decide that. But, you also need to make sure you've got the right tools to do this analysis. EFK units for flies, and, you've got to pick the right one, pick the right one for you. They're all, your suppliers will talk to you about it, but you get different sizes, you get different lights, you get, glue traps, you can get kill grids, there's different types you can have. You can have up lights, down lights, in lights. There's different, speak to your supplier about which one's right for you, for your site. And a lot of the time you're going to have to, consider the range of it as well. So it's not just the tools within the EFK, but it's the range that light can attract the right flies in the right direction. So, consider your units. It's really important. And I think a lot of the time when we take over, if you're taking over a site that's already got EFKs positioned, you need to make sure that they are the right machines, but that they're in the right position. I was out on a site visit a couple of weeks ago with a member, and we went to a shopping centre, and no word of a lie, there was an electrical fly killer. I would say, I'm not feet, meters, whatever, but it must have been 5 meters above our head, and you kind of think, is that really doing a job up there? But sometimes, your customer says, well, there's one there, we don't want to pay for another one, just use that one. But it's not going to be doing the job, is it? You need the right tools in place. You need the right, your data is going to mean nothing. If you've got this fancy data, look at these flies. Oh, look, you've got no flies. You haven't had any this year. But you kind of look at the site and think, well, that's because all the EFKs are in the wrong place and they're not, being checked properly, because health and safety getting up to, work with those EFKs is just not something that happens regularly. So you're not collecting it. So, position, you need to think about positioning the unit itself. Is it right for that area? But also the position of it, considering generally the height that flies will hover at. So high up in the air is not a great thing for the technical aspect, but like I mentioned, the health and safety aspect of it as well. Speak to your suppliers about the types you've got. And of course, your customer, convincing them that they've got things in the wrong place and they need moving. But if they decide not to, then it'd be on their head that they're not going to get, proper control or monitoring data from these EFKs. As long as you tell them that and that they accept that, then what can you do? It's them that make those decisions. You also then need to decide the intervals of the searches. So, you've decided that you've got some great equipment, it's going to work well, we've positioned them correctly, we've got enough of them around the site, but you also need to decide how often you're going to be checking them. Some sites it might be, once every 2 weeks. Some sites it might be once a month, once every 8 weeks. Some of them might be a case of, well, actually, January to say April, we visit them and do some data once a month, just because insects are generally a little sleepier, a little quieter, and then as the weather warms up, maybe from May to, well, it varies these days, isn't it? But May to September, you're doing more regular data searches and fly catch analysis, because that's when you need to catch something. If you go to that number 6 EFK monitor and you think, whoa, okay, there's a huge increase in, I don't know, house flies, then you can get on it straight away. Whereas if you were doing like monthly visits to those electrical fly killers, you wouldn't necessarily pick up on it, because we know we want to prevent things, don't we? We want to pick up on things early, preferably prevent them, obviously, but if we can't prevent them, then pick up on them really early so that we can get in there and do our thing. Up to you to decide. Maybe it'd be on every routine visit, maybe it's a separate contract to your general pest management. I've seen that before. They kind of run side by side, but they have some slight differences, because you're all your other routine stuff, rodents or whatever, you might say, oh no, 8 visits a year is enough, I don't need to do any more than that. However, electrical fly killers, I think we need to visit them more often, because of the location of the site. Then you might need to run those contracts parallel. Again, speak to your customer. It's up to you and them. So got to think of these things. So good equipment, positioned really well. Obviously decide on your timed searches, or when you're going to do these counts, and what detail you go into. And when you've got all of those things in place, then you can start creating this great data. Without those things, it means nothing. With a poorly positioned EFK unit, the data is going to mean nothing. It's fictional, because it's not doing what it needs to do. Okay, I'm afraid it's holding up, isn't it? I'm going to have another little sip. Bear with. Because I don't want to lose you. Okay, fabulous. So how we do it then. So all those things are important. The other bit. So we've got our good equipment. We've got positioning around the sites and where we're going to have it. We've decided how often we're going to visit that machine and how much detail we're going to go into. But it's also important to set critical control limits or thresholds. Now, basically, all that is let's say you've got Natalie's butcher's shop, and you're my pest controller, and I we have a look at the history of the site, and I say to you, right, there's certain EFK units here. As a maximum, I do not want to see any more than 10 big flies in there, or I don't want to see one house fly in there, or you set these critical control limits. You're a customer, you talk into your customer, you decide what is an acceptable level of fly activity. If you're doing a trend, doing a count day, and you're going through and you say, well, actually the acceptable level of nocturnal flying insects is 10, and large flies it's 10 also, but that's an acceptable level. I'm not going to get too excited about it. We've got a history of flies. We live in a rural area where maybe there's farming and things going on, or maybe there's a fly tip nearby, and we're going to get odd ones coming in. But 10 is, this is just an example. You might decide 10 is a number that you're not going to get too excited or too worried about, and then if it goes above that number, that's when you start taking more action, and you start looking into, right, okay, actually we've got 15 or 20 in there this time, something's changed, that critical control limit or that threshold has been breached, so therefore we need to take more action. Okay, it's just a sensible way to set these maximum levels for acceptable activity, because we're not going to eradicate all flies, are we? And they're small insects that can squeeze through little holes and little gaps, and you can't always proof buildings fully. I'll say always, probably never proof them fully to be able to prevent them getting in. We can do as much as we can to reduce the numbers that could possibly get in, but you're still possibly going to have those. So deciding what your acceptable level is, and there is no one answer. One site might say, oh, do you know what? It's the reception area in a packaging company, they might be all right with 20 or 30 different types of flies in there, not too bothered, because it's low risk, or maybe you perceive it as low risk. So you'll set that critical control level differently to maybe somewhere, where they've got, open raw food production and they've got an electrical fly killer there. You don't even really want one in there, probably, do you? So you could have different critical control limits in different areas of your site. And that's where, sometimes it can start getting complicated, but that's usually, when you've got larger sites that have, varying different types of areas where you might need to do different levels of trend analysis. So you've got that critical control, but have your templates ready as well. We've got some I can share with you, BPCA members have access to. But again, there's no, a spreadsheet that we might create. You might look at it and go, oh, that's basic. I've got something that's much better than that. That's great. If you find the templates that you want, whether it's one that you use that we've created, or one of your suppliers might help you out with one, or you may be a whiz on spreadsheets and graph building and be able to make one yourself. But just have those ready. Sit down and think, right, what do I need? I've got this site here. What sort of map or data do I need to record, and then tailor that to your template? Okay, so you've got to sit down and think about these things. And of course, annual reports on the data analysis. Once you've got those templates and you build that data, doing a report is a really good way for your client to sort of see, wow, this pest control is amazing. Mostly. If thresholds, for example, going back to that, are exceeded in any one particular area, then maybe it's a hygiene deficiency. If say you've got an increase in, let's say, for example, fruit flies in a particular area where it's quite wet, then maybe you say, well, what's the hygiene been like? Maybe there's a deficiency or a proofing malfunction or a change in some sort of process on site. This data can make you go, oh, Natalie, butcher lady, there's been an increase in this area of these flies. Has something changed recently? Has someone, oh yeah, actually we've had a few people off recently, and that area has probably been neglected a bit. We haven't really been cleaning it. Right, that makes sense. And you can use those, critical control levels and that data to be able to say something's happened and let's put it right. Okay. This is really basic example. This is like an example of what Natalie does in her spare time, just creating like really high quality maps for you. It's just a visual example. This is all fictional stuff here. But you devise a site plan, depending on how large your site is, depending on how good you are with creating plans, or maybe your customer will say, actually, I've got a really great plan that you can use, and you can just plot your EFKs around that site by handwriting it, or maybe even scanning it and doing some fancy work. It really is up to you. Depends on what resources you have and what skills you have. But this is just a basic example that you can use. You can see the different areas there, everywhere from office and reception to goods in and goods out and factory floor. And here you can see EFK machine number 4. It's a raw material area. So going back to the things I've said, you will possibly look at these machines in a different way. The office reception, we haven't got one there. I could move it over there. But for example, the staff kitchen, it may have different critical control level points than in the raw food material. You may just set them all the same, just for ease. There really is no one answer. But as you can see, there's different areas with different EFKs, and it's a good visual to be able to plot them. And also, if someone else is following up on some work that you've done, maybe you can't go back, or a different technician is going in to check these EFKs, it gives them a good visual of where all these EFKs are. Because sometimes you get sites where there's, dozens and dozens and dozens of them, maybe even hundreds of them in some situations. So, they need to know where they all are. But again, this is a really, really basic one, just to give you an idea of that, you got your documents ready, your templates ready, get a site plan as well, just as we would do with, rodent monitoring. It's good to have this here. So, maps can also, indicate the critical control level points by colour. For instance, I haven't got it here, but if the raw material, for example, might be coloured red because, the critical control level is lower than what it would maybe be in the staff kitchen. But you can do all sorts of fancy things, but this is just a basic example. Where's my mouse gone? There it is. So template wise, this is a BPCA template. This is just a case study. Any of the data that appears up here is all completely fictional. It's just to give you an idea of what things can look like and how you can use that data. So there's an example template. You can download this from our documents section, obviously, if you remember. These templates on first glance can sometimes seem complicated. Okay, some of you maybe, some of you not, but you look at it and think, all these bars and charts and different boxes to fill in. On first glance, it can sometimes be complicated and overwhelming. But if you're just starting out on that journey, however, the construction of these can take some particular skill. I didn't create this. Our Marcoms created this lovely document, and you do have to have certain knowledge of creating them to be able to get the data to do what you want it to do. But once you've done that, and again, we've got a template for members if they want to use it, the resulting use is pretty straightforward. So in this form, the principles are pretty basic. You number your fly units. So going back to that slide here, you've got unit 1 to 5. Again, I know, some of you might say, Jesus, Natalie, I've got a site where there's 70 units. Right? You can apply this regardless of how many EFK units you've got. But me being able to share a screen with 5 EFKs on rather than 70 is a lot easier for just, for you guys viewing it. So, yeah, pretty basic. You number your fly units, map them out as shown on that previous slide, and then enter them into this template. Sorry, guys, it's that time of year. It's the weather messing my throat up. So pretty basic, the principles of it, enter into the template and off you go. Each interval that you do, do your checks on, you'll count the flies, enter them into the spreadsheet, and look at the the results afterwards. So this is an example here. So the date, I've just done an example here just so you can see how we might use the graph. Last cough, hopefully. For example, so units 1 to 5, we went back to that slide. Unit 2, which was in the goods out area, had a sudden increase in large flies. So that was, I started clicking on it to go back to the a sudden increase. So you can see that here as well, large flies, and that was in January. And you kind of think, yeah, a large fly increase in January. That's strange. Why would that happen? So then a really good bit here is this analysis of the findings. So not only do you have the data, but next to that, you've actually got an analysis. So if your customer sees this in a folder or an auditor sees this in the folder, they'll go, great. There's an increase in those flies in the area. That's wonderful. What have you done about it? And yeah, of course, they could probably go back on your treatment reports and see what you've done. But why not use the spreadsheet to actually, just do a brief synopsis of what you've done? So as you can see, analysis of findings. Unit 2 showed a high amount of house flies, Mus domestica, which was investigated. And it was found that the goods out area had overflowing waste bins that was unusual and an isolated incident. The site removed this and cleaned the area, which resolved the issue. So maybe it was having a particularly warm bit of January then as well. Oh, I just clicked on it again. I'll keep doing that. I'll keep clicking on it. So yeah, that it just shows, yep, we've identified it was, okay, it's a large fly, but this is what fly it was. There was an issue with the waste. We've sorted it out. Don't worry about it. So again, this is all really good data, and it looks so great in site folders, and auditors absolutely love to see it. And the more information you can give, and the more guidance on we've solved this issue, the better, really. Just another example down the bottom here. See in April, units 1, 2, and 3 had increase in large flies, had an increase in a lot of the fly areas, to be honest, but mostly in large flies. And again, we've put a bit of a synopsis there saying all units showed an increase in cluster flies, which is due to the seasonal emergence of adults seeking egress. The machines are doing their job in managing the emergence and preventing the high risk contamination. So we're basically saying, look, cluster flies, they're going to emerge this time of year. If you've got one of those sites that are unfortunate enough to have a reoccurring issue with overwintering cluster flies, there's not always a lot you can do about it, but having EFKs in place, having this, mitigating your measures by trying to prevent that high risk contamination is what they want to hear. Not particularly bad today, sorry guys. Okay, so blimey, we're getting on time as well. So that's kind of how we would do it. It's straightforward, isn't it? I don't think there's anything too complicated about what we see there, but certainly having your, obviously your months, your unit numbers, the types of flies, and then your analysis of what that data means and what you've done to solve that problem is always a really great thing to do, a great thing to see. Of course, colourful as well. So yeah, great. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a visual there. So I think in terms of this, do you know what? And let me talk about this a little bit more. So each individual will like just talk about trend analysis generally. Some of you may be sitting there thinking, yeah, this template's great, I could use this. Others may be saying, there's not enough detail in there. I've spoken to a few people over the last couple of weeks that work within, food manufacturing, and they deal with data analysis a lot. And some of the things they do with data is amazing. I mean, way past what I could ever dream of being able to do or even get my head around. But, real, complex analysis of, fly machines that are based around multiple sites around the whole of the country, and and hundreds of machines that really analyze, and they've even got automatic systems that analyze that data, really fancy, all the way to the more basic sort of lower profile sites or smaller sites where you're starting out in your journey on trend analysis. Something like this may help you out with that. Like I said at the beginning, this is for those that are starting out the journey on trend analysis, but it really can be this straightforward. It really can be this basic, you've got the right tools, you've got the right, positioning, you've got the right documentation, you've decided on the, the fly species that you're gonna, even, SPIs, you can have SPIs in there, of course, like you can see on here, the red side there. I mean, just out of interest, we've got, I've done it again. We've got SPIs, becoming a bit of an issue a bit later on in the year. So, for example, you go to maybe the packaging area of a warehouse, and suddenly you've got an increase in, let's say, biscuit beetles in a particular fly killer machine. Then you'll say, okay, well, what do biscuit beetles feed on? Okay, they feed on these different things. Okay, actually, they are storing some of these things. And I've just had a delivery yesterday. Right, that's probably what it is. So let's go and chat to the manager, talk about this delivery that came on board, investigate that delivery, and maybe you'll find the source of a problem. So, you can look at this data and figure out why things might have occurred. You might not even notice some things. Sometimes you're doing your fly catch analysis, maybe a technician's doing it, putting the data in, and maybe a supervisor or a manager is actually, delving into that data and just making sure that, things are being picked up. So it's not just for your customers to use it, it is for you to, maybe do some quality assurance as well. It's quite useful. But as I said, each individual is going to like their, different templates. Some are more complex than others. You may want to drill down more into the species and the specifics, but, for some, this is completely relevant. Remember, just walk before you can run. If you're new to this, start off with something that I don't like using the word basic. I hate that word. It's just, it doesn't really do justice, but something a little bit less complicated and straightforward, and does the job. It's all you want it to do. You want the trend analysis to do the job for you, and what that is will depend on your site. Okay. But yeah, so just as a summary, decide where you might benefit from trend analysis. Not every site's going to do it. You've got a office block in city centre. I'm probably not going to do trend analysis there, am I? It's normally food production sites or pharmaceutical sites or anywhere that's got an accreditation associated with it. So yeah, decide where you're going to do it, and find the template that suits you. Set up your site. Make sure you've got the right tools. Like I said, maybe focus on the template, the data, the fly species and things, which is really important, but all the stuff that comes before that is more important, because otherwise that data won't mean anything. Like I said, your positioning of these monitoring devices, the brand, the type, the light output, that's important. Is it the right if it's covering a certain square meterage, is that enough for the area that you're putting it in? Is it glue, or is it kill grid? Is it being maintained as well? Are the bulbs being changed regularly enough? Because if all these things aren't being done, if all these things haven't been considered, if all these tools are not quite right and a little bit wrong, then that data is gonna mean diddly squat. It's going to mean nothing. Okay, so you can only really get that data if you've got the right tools in place. Okay, and yeah, get counting. Hopefully, again, that was a whistle-stop tour of trend analysis. Hopefully, we've got 10 questions in the Q&A. So luckily, we've got a good 15 minutes before I need to think about going. You know me, I like to stick around if you want me to. I'm in charge after all. I think now my throat's recovered. Sorry, that was Alexa talking at me then. Let's turn her off. I thought I'd turned her off. Oh, we like these little comedy inputs, don't we? Okay, great. So Q&As. If there's a contamination, how does the trend data? Sorry, the question's worded very badly. How can the trend data, how can it help? So yes, if there is a contamination, how can that data help? So like I mentioned, this is quite an early on question, I think, but I mentioned at the beginning, sometimes when you have a sudden issue or we've had a contamination. Yes, this data is not necessarily going to help you prevent that contamination. It might, because if, say, the previous month or so, you started to notice a slight increase in fly numbers in a certain area, you can get on it. You can prevent, hopefully, from that contamination happening. But yeah, of course, there's contamination. The data is not going to help to prevent it. But going forward, you can say, right, this thing happened. Okay, we can see this data. We can see that there's an increase in fly activity. And that was in February and we didn't actually see it or we didn't notice it. Right, let's keep an eye on that. Let's put some processes in place to make sure that, whatever caused that, be it a hygiene issue or a housekeeping issue, it might have even been a proofing issue. We can put those things right and prevent it. And again, it's just good reporting. Sometimes, trend analysis isn't always about just, doing pest management and solving problems. It's about showing what you're doing. It's about saying to your customers, look, these are the things we're doing. You can see we've had these peaks and flows, and these are the things we've done to sort it out. And then the following year, because when you've got a couple of years of data, that's when it gets really helpful and gets, I say, really exciting. Some are more excited about these things than others, but you can really look back and go, look how successful we've been, and it keeps those customer relationships, it keeps auditors happy. They can see you doing these things. So yeah, data trending is predominantly about showing what you've done, showing how you've done it, and that, you've picked up on these peaks and flows. So rather than obviously preventing, it can prevent, but it is more of a going forward thing. So hopefully I've answered that. Okay, sorry, I couldn't read the question quite properly, but I think that's what you were getting at. So here from Jack, how quickly are the smart AI EFKs with remote monitoring penetrating the market? How accurate are they? I have absolutely no idea, Jack. Speak to your supplier about that. When it comes to products, whether it's pesticides or whether it's EFK machines, you're always best talking to your suppliers about them. I get feedback from different people, but it's not always regular. So, but I mean, it will depend on your site, depending on what you need it for. But yeah, speak to your supplier about the different EFKs. They can give you all the stats. They can give you all, which ones have been ordered the most or used the most or are successful. So have a chat to them about, whether or not they're particularly accurate. This is it. I mean, I sort of mentioned it, about tools and making sure you've got the right things in place and light output, UVA output. These things are really important as well to make sure, to make that data actually factual, you need to make sure that the machines are working properly, and you can get all sorts of light monitors to monitor that light output and make sure it's working. Again, your suppliers will tell you about all these tools that you can use to have a really effective EFK management program. So David, hi Nats. Hi David. Would you have to inform your insurance company if you are installing electrical products in customers' properties? So usually, so yes, I remember this one. Of course, you're not going to be installing a plug socket or hard wiring an EFK machine yourself unless you're a qualified electrician. That'll be something your customer will have to arrange. You can provide the machine, you can provide the positioning details. It needs to be here, it needs to be there. Don't put it here, don't put it there. And then they call someone in to hardwire it if that's what they want to do. But a lot of them just have a plug, so up on the wall, plugging it in. By all means, speak to your insurers if you want to. But yeah, you can't be installing, like hard wiring stuff, opening that wiring. No, of course. No, you've got to be trained for that. So Mohammed, what is the ideal position of an EFK in order to maximize the insect catch? That is a question for every individual separate site that you've got. There's no one answer for that. The only answer in terms of height wise, so generally flies will always accumulate in an area that's probably just about above where, maybe 6 foot, 5'10", 6 foot, around that sort of area. So having an electrical fly killer in that area, that positioning will be the most effective. Again, species, they can vary. This is just a generic term, what we always say, the best positioning for an EFK. So just above head height. But the other important reason is not just for the technical aspect of attracting the right flies at the right time, to be able to get the management that you need, but it's also for health and safety. Again, I know like sometimes isn't really a health and safety presentation, but you cannot expect a technician or even yourself to, service a fly killer that's, 2 meters up in the air from a ladder. That could get you in a lot of trouble. Most accidents that, a lot of the accidents that happen in the UK are based on ladder use and the incorrect use of it. And we certainly can't be climbing up a ladder and putting our hands in the air, and you just can't do that. It's not safe. It's unsafe. So you need to have something that maybe is reachable, or, you just have a small platform or a step that they can stand on to be able to take it off the wall and service it, take the bulbs out. It depends on the machine, depends on the positioning. But you need to make sure that access is not just about the technical aspect of the flies, but it's about the person being able to service it, because servicing it is really, really important. Okay, so what points are to be considered for trend analysis in the diary and pharmaceutical industry according to the audit? That's too specific. So I think you're asking about, for the pharmaceutical industry, what sort of analysis is needed and how often. Have a look at the standard. The standard will tell you a lot of the time how often they want you to do it. And if they don't state how often you need to do it, you do it as often as you decide. If you've got a site that they say, we've had loads of fly problems, we get flies all the time, we've had 4 cases of contamination, and, it's a real issue because we live in an area where there's a recycling centre over there, there's a farm over there, and, all these issues, then you're going to be doing more analysis. You're going to be having more insect species specific detail than you would on a site where they say, well, we get a few flies. We've never had any issues really, contamination. We want you to do the trend analysis, but we don't tend to notice that many flies around or that many problems. Then you may just do, every 2 or 3 months, you might go and do trend analysis. I say once, twice a year doesn't really work. I'd say generally monthly is a good guide. But maybe the lower level sites, maybe every 2 months, but that data, if you're only doing a couple of visits a year, that data doesn't really do anything then, because you just got 2 little areas of information, which doesn't give you much. So I think, a whole year's worth, once a month generally is an average. But Raj, go and have a look at that. Go and have a look at the standard. It'll tell you if it wants you to have a particular interval of inspections. It'll tell you, and if it doesn't tell you, that means it's saying you make the decision. Okay. So hello Natalie, hello Bilal. Is there any recommended type of fly catcher EFK unit we have to highlight to the client? So do I recommend any particular EFK? So of course, brand wise, no, absolutely not. Speak to your supplier. There's so many different ones, high end, I say low end, I don't think there's any low end, but different prices, different looks, different, aesthetic features, as well as the light. So speak to your supplier about what machine to use. So in terms of, or is it any glue board fly catcher we need to install? The glue board, generally you'll have a glue catch if it's in a sensitive area. You don't want them insects hitting a kill grid and exploding and contaminating anything. And also it's easier to obviously count those flies. If you've got an EFK on the wall and it's got a catch tray and the flies are coming into a grid, exploding, landing into the EFK unit, not only is it harder to count them, but you've got little particles, like they do explode sometimes, don't they? A big bang. So actually identifying them can be really tricky. So you'll possibly see a lot of the time, the glue boards are what are used for EFK trend analysis, because a lot of the time they'll come in grids as well. And you can generally say if the board is quite evenly covered with flies, you can, take a couple of grids and multiply that by however many other grids there are to get a rough idea. Some specifications do want specific numbers, there's 271 of whatever, rather than there's, you go up in tens or hundreds, depends on the site. So, but yeah, the glue boards are good because they don't explode, the flies don't explode, and you can identify them better. But also it gives you a good grid reference with regards to counting high numbers of flies. So also, I have heard that the height and location of flycatchers must be taken into consideration. Yeah, that was an early-ish question. So I think I covered that. Yeah, they've got to be taken into consideration, and I answered it just a moment ago. Mohammed, so can we get a copy of the capture analysis? Do you mean the presentation, or do you mean the template? If you mean the template, yeah, all members have got access to it. You need your login, go onto the BPCA website, log in, go and find codes and documents, scroll down, find documents, and it's quite a new template as well, so it'll be at the top of the list, but you can always just search flycatch analysis and it'll come up. So that's downloadable for everyone to use. If you mean the presentation, you can, the slides are not available to you, but you can go and watch this later when we upload it. Again, so when the data is decreasing, should we explain to the customer? Oh my gosh, yes, 100%. So if you see, the data is, you think, well, the previous year we had all these spikes here, there, and everywhere, and you've done an annual report, or you've done your little report in the side of the spreadsheet, like I showed you there, saying, noticed a problem there. We've done this to solve it, and we're all happy. Great, you've got that year's data. If the following year you find that, we're not getting these spikes anymore, that basically means the things you're doing are working. The recommendations you're giving your customers are being done. The proofing is working. The machines are catching the flies and, stopping that contamination. Tell your customer about it. They'll be pretty happy. And you want to rave about the good things, don't just talk about the bad things. Don't just talk about we've got lots of flies here, or, you're pretty bad at that, or, your housekeeping is pretty shoddy, you need to sort it out. These things are important, of course, but we want to also feed back the positive data and the positive decrease in fly activity. We all like to hear good things, don't we? What other 5 or 10 minutes? Got 7 questions left. So, blimey, some long ones here. So from Ken, from a data analysis point of view, there are 3 things which need to be emphasized. So species, can only compare similar species, i.e. no large flies to wasp comparisons. So yeah, again, going into that species is pretty important. Seasonality, have to compare number from same time in previous year, i.e. March with previous March. Just mentioned that, didn't we? That data can change, and you can see that actually, we're doing a great job. That thing that was a problem last year is not a problem this year. And then 3, gap between visits is critical. Yeah, the longer between intersections means counts will be higher. So yeah, like I said, usually the things that I've done in the past, and I hear other people doing, monthly fly catch analysis, and it's based on your site. Some sites, like we said, don't need trend analysis for flying, for whatever reason. It's just not one of those sites that say you need to have it and you feel it's not going to benefit. Whereas the sites that will benefit, or the audit specifications that say you do need it, generally monthly counts is going to be important, isn't it? If not more. But I totally agree with that, Ken. Thank you for that. You obviously do a lot of this stuff. So welcome, and thank you for being here and making those comments. David Lodge, so would larger companies be happy with a basic trend analysis, or would they be looking for all bells and whistles? Companies with greater resources can most likely offer more. Yeah, absolutely. And this is it. You've got basic forms of templates and trend analysis, all the way up to the most complicated, automated graphs that one may have ever seen. It really depends on the site, and yeah, of course, larger companies are always going to have more resources. But then that's where BPCA, we do try and help out the smaller companies by creating these templates that can be a start. The template we've got, you might get it and think, what? I like this BPCA, it's good, but I can make it better. You can edit them. You can add more columns, you can add more species information. You can build it. But like I said at the beginning, it's this is for those that are maybe starting out on the journey, or have only just started and kind of think, I might just want to make sure I'm doing the right things, doing the things I need to. And you can build from that. The more time we spend doing trend analysis, the more we perfect it, the more we add things and go, actually, this year I'm going to start looking at that, or putting that information in there. So yeah, good. Thank you, David. We have got 6 more questions. I'll try and get through them. If you're all okay, just bearing with me for another 5-10 minutes. Anyone that needs to go, I totally understand. I won't be offended. I won't hunt you down. So hang on, let me just do a question from here. So how can you set up the action the critical control, the threshold in food manufacturing company based on the areas and risks to the product? I mean, setting a critical control levels or the threshold of what's acceptable. I mean, again, there is no one answer. That's why I love this industry, because there's no one answer. It's very exciting. You've got to look at the site, you've got to look at the history, you've got to sit down with your customer, talk to your customer, right? What would be acceptable to you? That's probably the best place to start. Talk to your customer and say, right, what's acceptable to you? Us finding 5 flies in that machine or 50 flies, or you can start from there. Okay, so there's no one answer to that. Matt, could we have an Excel copy? Hang on, I think I answered that already. Yeah, with regards to the template, so that's good. Sorry, chat section's popped up and I can't see my question now. There we go. Glue board insect count quite okay, but struggling to count flies in catch tray analysis. Any suggestions for better insect count? Yeah, so I think I mentioned this a moment ago. That's where glue boards are really good, because normally they, again, speak to your supplier, but it's a rectangle shaped board with a grid over the whole thing with many, many squares. So if you've got a nice coverage of flies on there, you can normally, count 10 of the grids and say, right, well, there's 5 flies in that grid. Right, we'll multiply that by 20, 30, 40, whatever the difference is. And then that gives you a rough number. But some sites may want you to actually sit there and count each individual fly. I've heard that before. So yeah, they are good. If you've got a catch tray and you haven't got a board, you've got the kill grid that catches them, that may be okay for sites where you don't get that many flies. If you've got 40 or 50 flies that are being caught here and there throughout the year, it's not too onerous to count those things. But yeah, some sites where you get hundreds and hundreds, you don't want to be having to pen through them, counting them. Okay, we'll do a couple more. So, again, is it a need to decrease the number of flying pests to 0 or keep maintaining the number under the threshold? Again, these are all site-specific questions. There will be some sites where 0 is the only acceptable number. And obviously, that's fine, but your customer has to work with you to achieve that. But other sites, they might be 5. It really is site-specific. There is no one answer. Speak to your customer, find out what they do, find out, the different areas of production or manufacturing or whatever it is that they do, and what would be accepted. And what the kind of like a pest risk assessment. What would happen if a fly ended up in that product or ended up in that box, or what would happen, and of course, your customers might stop using them, or have prosecutions or fines, or health and safety visits, or environmental health officers coming around telling them off. All these things you've got to think about and then decide what is an acceptable level of activity. So there's a few questions about products and how useful is the square meter coverage number on an EFK, or is this meaningless because putting an EFK in the wrong place will render it useless? Yeah, because you may have an EFK that says, this will cover, I don't know, it's been a while since I've bought an EFK, to be honest, but I don't know, 10 square feet, 30 square feet. But if you've got it in the wrong position, or you've got competing light or things like that, then of course it won't work. This is where you really honestly use your suppliers. They're there to help, they're there to advise. You can give them a rough idea of the site that you need it for and where you're going to position it, and they can advise you which machine would be the best one. And the manufacturer's instructions, it will tell you all there as well. But I like to try and be specific where I can, but I can't be specific on that bit because it really is dependent. But you're right, that's an anonymous question. But how if an EFK covers a certain square footage doesn't mean that you can just plonk it anywhere and it'll do that thing. You need to position it correctly, and the manufacturer's instructions will allow for that. Okay, well, anyway, listen, I've got, I'm going to have to stop the webinar there. There's a few questions about lead lights on EFKs, whether they're effective and how often they need changing. Again, that's all manufacturer instruction stuff. It's yeah, it'll tell you what you need to know. Maybe sometimes we're all guilty, aren't we, of not reading instructions enough. Whether we're putting up a shelf or whether we're using a product, we need to make sure we're doing that. Same with EFK machines. It'll tell you what you need to know. Okay. And yeah, thank you for bearing with me. My throat is played up today. So, coughing's the first time, I think. Yeah, I struggled with that. So you all bared with me. Final thoughts. Have a wonderful day. Hopefully this has helped a little bit. Again, relatively basic. If you want to talk to anyone about it, your suppliers, give me a call, give me an email. We can send you some more information if you need it. And other than that, have a wonderful time. And I'll see you all soon. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.